I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to go through someone else's belongings. 73 years of life, and I'd always believed in trust, in respecting privacy, in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But when that yellowed envelope slipped from behind the false bottom of Richard's old desk drawer and landed at my feet, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered like fine china hitting marble. The letter inside wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my late husband, written 2 months before he died. And every word on that page was about me, about my money, about plans that had been carefully constructed behind my back. My daughter Caroline's handwriting, my son Michael's signature at the bottom, and words that made my blood run cold. Once Dad's gone, we need to act fast before Mom does something foolish with the estate. I'm Margaret Henderson, though most people just call me Maggie. For the past 6 months, I've been living in the house my husband Richard and I built 42 years ago. The house where we raised our 2 children. The house filled with memories of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday afternoons reading by the fireplace. Richard passed away last January from a heart attack, sudden and devastating, leaving me alone for the first time in 4 decades. The grief had been crushing, but I'd been coping, or at least trying to. My children had been attentive in those first few weeks. Caroline came by every other day with casseroles and concerned questions about whether I was eating enough. Michael called regularly, checking if I needed help with the finances, with the house maintenance, with anything at all. I thought they were being loving children. I thought they were worried about their widowed mother. I had no idea they were circling like vultures, waiting for their moment to strike. Richard had been a successful commercial real estate developer. We weren't millionaires, but we were comfortable. Very comfortable. The house was paid off, worth about $800,000 in today's market. There were investment accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policies. When everything was tallied up, the estate came to just over $2 million. Richard had left everything to me, with the understanding that when I passed, it would be divided equally between Caroline and Michael. That seemed fair. That seemed right. We'd talked about it many times over the years, sitting at this very kitchen table discussing our wishes, making sure everything was in order. But finding that letter changed everything. I stood in Richard's study, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the golden light, and I read their words over and over again. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the paper. Dad, we know this is difficult to discuss, but we need to be practical. Mom's already talking about traveling to Europe, about maybe selling the house and moving to some retirement community. She mentioned donating to that arts foundation again. We can't let her fritter away our inheritance on whims and charities. You need to talk to her about setting up a trust with us as trustees. Tell her it's for tax purposes. Tell her it's to protect her from scams. Whatever works. Just make sure that when you're gone we have control. Michael's business needs a capital infusion, and I need to get myself out of this credit card debt before David finds out how bad it really is. This is our money too, Dad. We've waited long enough. Our money. They called it their money. Money Richard and I had worked 30 years to accumulate. Money from his long hours and business risks, from my careful budgeting and smart investing, from our joint sacrifices and planning. And they talked about it like it was already theirs, like I was just an inconvenient obstacle standing between them and what they believed they deserved. I sank into Richard's leather desk chair, the one that still smelled faintly of his cologne, and felt something inside me shift. The grief that had been my constant companion for 6 months suddenly mixed with something else. Anger. Cold, clarifying anger. How long had they been planning this? Had Richard known about their attitudes, their expectations? Is that why this letter had been hidden away, tucked behind the false bottom of his desk drawer like something shameful? I thought back over the past 6 months with new eyes. Caroline's frequent visits, always steering conversations toward the house, toward my plans for the future, toward whether I really needed all this space. Michael's offers to help organize the financial paperwork, to streamline the accounts, to make sure everything was properly structured. The way they'd both frowned when I mentioned the cruise to Alaska I was considering. The subtle comments about how the house was so much for one person to maintain. The suggestions about downsizing, about simplifying, about making things easier on myself. They hadn't been caring for me. They'd been managing me, herding me toward decisions that would benefit them. And I'd been so blinded by grief, so grateful for their attention, that I hadn't seen it. The letter was dated October 15th, 2 years ago. Richard died that December. Had he confronted them? Had he changed his mind about the inheritance? Or had the heart attack taken him before he could address their letter? I never know. But I did know one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me the way they tried to manipulate their father. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my purse. Then I sat at Richard's desk for a long time thinking, planning, remembering. The desk was a massive thing, solid mahogany with a dozen drawers and compartments. Richard had loved this desk. He'd bought it at an estate sale 30 years ago and restored it himself, spending weekends in the garage, carefully stripping and refinishing the wood. I ran my fingers over its smooth surface and felt tears prick my eyes. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of anger and betrayal. Richard and I had built our life together from nothing. When we married, we had $200 between us and a used Honda Civic. He worked construction during the day and took real estate classes at night. I worked as a secretary and stretched every dollar until it screamed. We saved for 5 years to put a down payment on our first house, a tiny 2-bedroom fixer-upper in a questionable neighborhood. We renovated it ourselves, Richard doing the heavy work while I painted and wallpapered and learned to tile. When we sold it 3 years later, we doubled our money. That became our pattern. Buy, renovate, sell, upgrade. By the time Caroline was born, we were living in a decent 3-bedroom in the suburbs. By the time Michael came along 4 years later, Richard had started his own development company. We gave our children everything. Caroline had ballet lessons, piano lessons, summer camp, private school. Michael played hockey and went on school trips to Washington and New York. We paid for their college educations in full. Caroline graduated from a prestigious liberal arts college with a degree in art history. Michael got his business degree from a well-ranked university. Neither of them had student loan debt. Neither of them had wanted for anything. Caroline married David Thornton when she was 26. David came from money, old Connecticut money, the kind that whispers rather than shouts. He worked in his family's investment firm, wore expensive suits, and always made me feel slightly underdressed in my own home. They lived in a beautiful colonial in Greenwich, had 2 children who attended private academy, and seemed to have the perfect life. But Richard and I had helped. We'd given them $50,000 for their down payment. We'd paid for the elaborate wedding Caroline had dreamed of. We'd covered the costs when their son needed braces and their daughter needed tutoring. Michael had always been the more adventurous one. He'd started 3 different businesses in the past 15 years. A tech startup that went nowhere. A restaurant that closed after 18 months. And now some kind of consulting firm that I'd never quite understood. Each venture had required capital. Each time Richard had helped. Not loans, gifts. Because that's what parents did, Richard always said. You help your children succeed. I'd agreed, though sometimes I'd wondered if we were helping or enabling. Michael was 40 now, and he'd never quite found his footing. His wife Jennifer was lovely but seemed perpetually stressed about money. They lived in a nice but not extravagant house, drove sensible cars, and seemed to be always just getting by despite Michael's impressive resume and confident manner. I'd loved my children unconditionally. I'd been proud of them. And I'd trusted them completely. The letter in my purse made me question everything. That evening Caroline called. She always called on Wednesday evenings, regular as clockwork. Hi, Mom. How are you doing today? I stood in the kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and heard her voice differently now. Was that genuine concern or performance? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just been sorting through some of your father's things in his study. There was the briefest pause. Oh? Find anything interesting? Interesting. What a word choice. Just memories, I said carefully. Your father kept everything. I found the card you made him for Father's Day when you were 7. Remember? With the handprints. She laughed, the tension I detected evaporating. Oh God, I'd forgotten about that. Listen, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving. We're planning to host this year and I was thinking about the menu. Also, David and I have been discussing your situation, and we have some ideas we'd like to run by you. My situation? What kind of ideas? Well, we've been thinking about how isolated you must feel in that big house, and how much work it must be to maintain. David knows an excellent real estate agent, and we thought maybe after the holidays we could start looking at some options for you. There are some wonderful senior living communities nearby. You'd have so much less to worry about and you'd have people around all the time. No more rattling around in that empty house. I gripped the phone tighter. This was exactly what the letter had warned about. They wanted me to sell the house, liquidate the asset, make the money more accessible for when their time came. I'm not rattling around, Caroline. This is my home. Your father and I built this house. I know, Mom, but it's so much space for one person. And the maintenance costs must be astronomical. The property taxes alone. I can afford the property taxes. Of course you can, but why throw money away when you could be somewhere more suitable? Somewhere designed for someone your age? They have activities and meal plans and I don't need activities and meal plans. I need my home. The home where I raised you and your brother. The home where your father and I had our life. Mom, we're just trying to help. We worry about you. What if something happens? What if you fall or get sick and there's no one around? I have a cell phone. I have neighbors. I have friends. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Caroline, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to make any changes. I'm still processing losing your father. The house is a comfort to me right now. Another pause. Okay, Mom. I understand. We won't push. But promise me you'll think about it? For the future. I'll think about it. I wouldn't. But I'd say what she wanted to hear, just as I'd always done. The good mother. The agreeable mother. The mother who didn't cause problems. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and sat at the kitchen table. The letter was still in my purse. I took it out and read it again, studying every word, every phrase. Make sure that when you're gone, we have control. That's what they wanted. Control. Not my welfare. Not my happiness. Control of the assets they believed were rightfully theirs. I thought about Richard's last months. He'd been quieter than usual, more contemplative. I'd attributed it to age, to the natural slowing down of a man in his mid-70s. But maybe it had been this. Maybe he'd been grappling with this letter, with what it revealed about our children's characters. Maybe it had contributed to the stress that weakened his heart. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The moon shone through the curtains, casting silver shadows across the room. Richard's side of the bed was empty, as it had been for 6 months, the sheets cold and smooth. I missed him with an ache that felt physical. But alongside the grief was a new emotion. Determination. If Richard hadn't been able to confront this situation, I would. I wouldn't be managed. I wouldn't be manipulated. And I certainly wouldn't let my children treat me like an inconvenient obstacle to their inheritance. The next morning I made an appointment with Thomas Bradford, the estate attorney who had handled Richard's will. Thomas was about my age, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes who had been practicing law for 40 years. We'd known him socially for decades and I trusted him. His office was in a converted Victorian in the historic district, all dark wood and leather furniture and the smell of old books. His secretary showed me into his inner office, and Thomas rose to greet me with a warm smile. Maggie, how good to see you. How are you holding up? That's what I need to talk to you about, Thomas. I sat in the chair across from his desk and pulled the letter from my purse. I found this in Richard's desk. I need to understand what they might be planning and what I can do to protect myself. Thomas read the letter slowly, his expression growing more serious with each paragraph. When he finished, he set it down carefully and removed his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth from his pocket. I see. This is concerning, Maggie. Have your children approached you about any financial arrangements since Richard passed? Not directly. But Caroline's been pushing me to sell the house and move to a retirement community. Michael keeps offering to help with the finances to simplify things. They're circling, Thomas. I can feel it. He nodded. The good news is that Richard's will is ironclad. Everything is yours with no restrictions. You have complete control over all assets. They can't force you to do anything. But, he smiled grimly, but they can try to convince you. They can try to make you feel guilty or incapable or overwhelmed. And if they're clever, they might try to establish grounds for questioning your competency. The word hit me like a slap. Competency. It's rare and it's difficult to prove, But if they could argue that you're not capable of managing your own affairs, they could petition for guardianship or conservatorship. I'm not saying they will, and I'm certainly not saying they'd succeed. You're clearly sharp as a tack, Maggie, but given this letter, I think we need to be proactive. What do you suggest? First, I'd recommend a full cognitive evaluation from a neurologist, just to have documentation of your mental acuity. Second, I think we should review your estate plan and make sure it reflects your current wishes. Do you still want to divide everything equally between Caroline and Michael? I'd been thinking about this since finding the letter. I'm not sure anymore. They're not the children I thought I raised. You don't have to decide today, but you should think about it. In the meantime, I'm going to draft a letter to both of them from me, making it clear that you're my client, that you're fully capable of managing your own affairs, and that any attempts to interfere will be viewed as elder abuse and dealt with accordingly. Won't that just make things worse? It might. Or it might make them back off. Either way, we need to establish clear boundaries. You're not a helpless old woman, Maggie. You're a 73-year-old woman in full possession of her faculties and her estate. They need to understand that. I left Thomas's office feeling both reassured and apprehensive. The legal protections were in place, but laws couldn't protect me from my own children's manipulations. That would require something else. Vigilance. Strength. A willingness to confront them if necessary. The cognitive evaluation happened the following week. Dr. Patricia Chan was a renowned neurologist at the hospital where Richard had been treated. She put me through a battery of tests, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks, questions about current events, spatial reasoning puzzles. I felt like I was back in school, anxious to prove myself, worried about failing. But when it was over, Dr. Chan smiled and closed her folder with satisfaction. Mrs. Henderson, your cognitive function is excellent. Your memory is better than most 50-year-olds I test. Your reasoning skills are sharp, and you show no signs of any cognitive decline whatsoever. In my professional opinion, you're more than capable of managing your own affairs. She wrote out a letter documenting her findings, sealed it in an envelope, and handed it to me like a diploma. I felt absurdly proud. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that I wasn't becoming the helpless elderly woman my children seemed to think I was. Armed with this documentation and Thomas's legal backing, I felt ready to address the situation directly. But before I could plan my approach, Michael forced the issue. It was a Saturday morning in late October. The leaves were brilliant oranges and reds, falling in drifts across the lawn that Richard had always kept so meticulously trimmed. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see Michael's silhouette. Mom, hey. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. He stepped into the foyer, bringing the scent of autumn air and expensive cologne. Michael always dressed well, even on weekends. Today it was designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost $300. In the neighborhood? I raised an eyebrow. Michael lived 30 miles away. But I didn't call him on the lie. Come in. I just made coffee. In the kitchen, I poured 2 cups while Michael made small talk about the weather, about his kids, about nothing important. But I could sense the tension in him, the way he kept glancing around the kitchen as if cataloging its contents. Finally, he set down his cup and leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. My business is at a critical juncture. We have an opportunity for a major expansion, but we need capital. I'm talking about something that could set us up for life, that could finally make all those years of struggling pay off. I see. I sipped my coffee, waiting. I was hoping you might consider investing. Not as a gift, as an actual investment. You'd get equity in the company. It would be good for both of us. Your money would be working for you instead of just sitting in accounts earning minimal interest. How much are you asking for? He hesitated. $300,000. I felt my eyebrows shoot up. That's quite a lot, Michael. I know, but this is huge, Mom. And it's not like you can't afford it. Dad left you plenty. This would be a smart investment for your future too. Michael, I'm 73 years old. I don't need investments for the future. I need security for the present. But that's exactly what this would give you. Returns that could fund a much better lifestyle. You could travel, do all the things you and Dad talked about but never got around to. There it was. The manipulation I'd been expecting. Making it about what was good for me when really it was about what he needed. And if the business fails like the others? His face flushed. That's not fair, Mom. Those were learning experiences. This is different. I know what I'm doing now. Then you should be able to get conventional financing. Or investors who aren't your mother. Banks don't understand innovation. They want collateral and proven track records. And outside investors would dilute my ownership too much. This is family, Mom. Families help each other. Families also respect each other's boundaries. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Michael, I'm not going to invest in your business. I'm sorry, but that's my final answer. His expression shifted, the earnest hopefulness replaced by something harder. Is this because of Caroline? Did she get to you first? Did she talk you into giving her money? This has nothing to do with your sister. This is about me protecting the resources your father and I spent our entire lives building. Protecting them from what? From your own children. That's what you think of us? That we're trying to rob you? I almost laughed at the irony. If only he knew what I'd found. I think you're trying to access inheritance money before there's an inheritance. I think you're impatient. Impatient. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm drowning, Mom. Do you understand that? I've got creditors breathing down my neck. Jennifer's family looks down on us because I can't provide the lifestyle they think their daughter deserves. My kids go to public school while their cousins are in private academies. And you're sitting on $2 million that's eventually going to be mine anyway, but I need it now when it can actually make a difference. There it was. The truth beneath the polish. He saw the inheritance as his money, just being temporarily held by an inconvenient parent. The money isn't yours, Michael. It's mine. And I'll decide what to do with it. Right. So you can leave it all to some charity? So you can piss it away on cruises and fancy dinners? That's our legacy, Mom. Mine and Caroline's. Money that should stay in the family. It will stay in the family. When I'm gone. Until then, it's mine to do with as I please. I stood up too, meeting his eyes. And I don't appreciate being pressured. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not love or concern or even frustration. It was contempt. My own son was looking at me with contempt, as if I were a selfish stranger hoarding resources that belonged to him. Fine, he said finally. But don't come crying to me when you're lonely and isolated, because you pushed away everyone who tried to help you. He left without another word, the front door closing with a sharp crack that echoed through the house. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. That was my son. My baby boy. The child I'd rocked to sleep and nursed through illnesses and cheered at hockey games. And he just threatened me, thinly veiled as concern, but a threat nonetheless. Agree to give me money or lose my relationship with you. I sank into the chair and put my head in my hands. How had it come to this? Where had I gone wrong? Had Richard and I given them too much? Made life too easy? Failed to teach them the value of struggle and earning their own way? Or was this simply greed, the timeless human failing of wanting more, of believing you deserved what someone else had worked for? That evening Caroline called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello, sweetheart. Mom, Michael just called me. He's very upset. He said you refused to help him with his business and accused him of trying to steal from you. So they were coordinating. Interesting. I didn't accuse him of stealing. I simply declined to invest $300,000 in a business venture. I don't understand. He's family, Mom. Family helps each other. Yes, and I've helped. I've helped plenty over the years. Both of you. College tuition. Down payments. Business startup costs. Your wedding. How much money have your father and I given you too over the years? Have you ever counted? Silence. Then coolly, we never asked to be born. We didn't choose to be your children. You chose to have us, to raise us, to provide for us. That was your responsibility. The coldness of it took my breath away. You're right. It was my responsibility. Past tense. You're 41 years old, Caroline. Michael's 40. You're adults. My responsibility to provide for you ended decades ago. So that's it? You're just going to hoard Dad's money and watch us struggle. You're not struggling. You live in a beautiful home in Greenwich. Your children go to excellent schools. David has a successful career. Where exactly is the struggle? She made an exasperated sound. You don't understand. We have expenses, obligations. We need to maintain a certain lifestyle. And you're sitting on assets you're never going to use while you're what? Living beyond your means? That's not my problem, Caroline. Fine. You know what? Just fine. But don't expect me to keep playing the dutiful daughter, checking in on you, making sure you're okay. If you want to be selfish, you can be selfish alone. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. My daughter had hung up on me because I wouldn't give her money that wasn't even hers yet. I sat with the silent phone in my hand and felt something inside me harden. The grief and confusion I'd been feeling crystallized into cold clarity. My children weren't worried about me. They'd never been worried about me. They were worried about their inheritance, about making sure I didn't do anything to diminish the eventual payout they believed they had coming. Over the next 2 weeks, the silence was deafening. Caroline didn't call on Wednesday evening. Michael didn't send his usual Sunday morning text. It was as if I'd ceased to exist for them. Or rather, as if I only existed as an obstacle. And since I wasn't cooperating, I wasn't worth their time. But I wasn't alone. I had friends who actually cared about me, not about my bank account. I had Dorothy Chun, my friend of 30 years, who came over for our weekly bridge game and listened without judgment as I explained what had happened. I had my neighbor Paul, a retired teacher, who checked in on me and helped me with small household repairs. I had my book club and my volunteer work at the library and my yoga class at the community center. My life was full. Or at least it had been. The absence of my children left a hole that nothing else quite filled. In early November, I received a letter. It came in a plain white envelope, addressed to me in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single page typed with no signature. Mrs. Henderson, we're concerned about your welfare. Your children have expressed worry that you're becoming isolated and making poor decisions. For your own protection, you should consider allowing them to help manage your affairs. It's not safe for someone your age to be handling complex financial matters alone. Please think about what's best for your long-term care. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling with anger. This was psychological manipulation, pure and simple. An anonymous letter designed to make me doubt myself, to make me think that other people were talking about me, that I was becoming a burden or a problem. I had no doubt where it had originated. Caroline and Michael might not have written it themselves, but they were behind it. I took the letter to Thomas Bradford the next day. He read it with a deepening frown. This is concerning, Maggie. Could be considered harassment. We could potentially trace it, though anonymous letters are difficult to prove without cooperation from postal authorities. I don't want to prove it. I just want it to stop. I paused. Actually, that's not true. I want to confront them. I want them to know that I know what they're doing. Thomas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Are you sure? Once you make this explicit, there's no going back. Your relationship with your children will be fundamentally altered. I think it's already fundamentally altered. I just didn't want to see it. All right. Then I suggest we arrange a family meeting. Here in my office with me present as your attorney. We'll lay everything on the table. The letter you found in Richard's desk. The pressure they've been applying. This anonymous letter. And we'll make it clear that you're not going to be manipulated. Will that help? Or will it just make things worse? Honestly, Maggie, I think things are already as bad as they can get from an emotional standpoint. But from a legal and practical standpoint, clarity is better than uncertainty. They need to understand that you're aware of what they're doing, and that you have legal representation to protect your interests. I agreed. Thomas sent letters to both Caroline and Michael, requesting their presence at a family meeting regarding estate matters. The letters were formally worded, professional, and impossible to ignore. The meeting was set for a Friday afternoon in mid-November. The days leading up to the meeting were agonizing. I slept poorly, my mind churning with possible scenarios. Would they be angry? Defensive? Apologetic? Part of me hoped that when confronted with evidence of their behavior, they'd be ashamed, that we could salvage something. But a more realistic part of me suspected this would simply make the conflict explicit. The day of the meeting arrived cold and gray, with a bitter wind that rattled the bare branches and sent leaves skittering across the pavement. I dressed carefully in a navy suit and pearls, armor for battle. Thomas had suggested I look professional and composed, to reinforce that I was a capable adult, not a confused elderly woman. His office felt different that afternoon. Less like the comfortable den where I'd had friendly consultations and more like a courtroom. Thomas sat behind his desk. 3 chairs were arranged facing him. I arrived first and took the middle chair, feeling exposed. 5 minutes later, Caroline and Michael arrived together, which didn't surprise me. They'd obviously coordinated. Caroline wore her power outfit. Tailored black pants, silk blouse, heels. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was dressed for a business negotiation, which I suppose she was. Michael wore a suit and tie, his expression guarded. Neither of them greeted me. They simply sat, Caroline to my right, Michael to my left, creating a wall of hostile solidarity. Thomas cleared his throat. "Thank you both for coming. I've asked you here because your mother has some concern she needs to address, and I'm here to facilitate that conversation, and to make sure everyone understands the legal parameters of the situation." "Legal parameters?" Caroline's voice was sharp. "This is about Mom's paranoia, isn't it? We're being called in like we've done something wrong." "Have you?" I spoke quietly, but both of them turned to stare at me. I pulled the folded letter from my purse and placed it on Thomas's desk. "Because I found this in your father's desk, behind a false panel in a drawer. It's dated 2 months before he died. Would you like to explain it?" Caroline's face went pale. Michael's jaw tightened. Neither of them spoke. Thomas picked up the letter and read it aloud, his voice level and professional. Every word was damning. "Once Dad's gone, we need to act fast before Mom does something foolish with the estate. This is our money too, Dad. We've waited long enough. Make sure that when you're gone we have control." When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the distant sound of traffic outside, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Where did you get that?" Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. "From your father's desk, where you presumably thought it would never be found." "That was a private letter," Michael said. "You had no right to read it. It was in my house, in my late husband's desk. I had every right to go through his belongings, and I have every right to know that my children were plotting to control my assets before their father was even dead." "We weren't plotting," Caroline said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We were just being practical. Dad was sick, even if he wouldn't admit it. We knew he didn't have long, and we were worried about you making impulsive decisions while you were grieving." "Impulsive decisions like traveling? Like donating to charity? Like living in my own home? Those are the foolish things you were afraid I'd do." "You don't understand the financial realities," Michael said. "That money represents generational wealth. It's not just about you. It's about the family legacy, about setting up your grandchildren, about being responsible with resources. And yet you wanted $300,000 for your business. How is that responsible?" His face reddened. "That's an investment. That's different." "It's not different. It's you wanting to use my money for your purposes. Both of you. You've been pressuring me, manipulating me, trying to convince me I'm incompetent or senile or incapable of managing my own life. And when I didn't cooperate, you stopped calling. You cut me off because I wouldn't give you what you wanted." "That's not what happened," Caroline protested. "You're twisting things." "Am I?" I pulled out the anonymous letter and placed it on the desk next to the first one. "Then explain this. An anonymous letter trying to convince me I need help managing my affairs, suggesting I'm making poor decisions, trying to scare me into giving up control. I don't suppose either of you know anything about this." They exchanged a glance, quick but telling. "We didn't write that," Michael said. "But you know about it." Another silence. Then Caroline sighed. "Fine. Yes. We asked David to write it. We thought if you heard concerns from someone outside the family, you might take them seriously. We were worried about you, Mom. You've been alone in that house, isolated, and we thought you might be getting depressed or confused." "I'm not confused. I'm not depressed. I'm grieving my husband while discovering that my children are more interested in my money than my well-being. I turned to Thomas. Tell them. Thomas opened a folder and pulled out Dr. Chen's letter. Your mother underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation 2 weeks ago. She was found to be in excellent mental health with no signs of cognitive decline. She is fully capable of managing her own affairs. Additionally, I want to make it clear that any further attempts to pressure her, manipulate her, or suggest she's incompetent will be viewed as elder abuse and reported to the appropriate authorities. Elder abuse? Michael stood up abruptly. This is insane. We're her children. We're trying to help. You're trying to control, I said. There's a difference. Caroline was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. How can you do this to us? We're your family. We've been there for you. We've called and visited and worried, and you've been managing me, checking on your investment, making sure I didn't do anything to diminish your eventual inheritance. That's not love, Caroline. That's not family. That's greed. So what now? Michael's voice was hard. You're going to disinherit us? Punish us for being honest about our needs? I haven't decided what I'm going to do with my estate, but I'm making it clear that from this point forward, my finances are not your concern. You will not pressure me. You will not send anonymous letters. You will not question my competency. If you want a relationship with me, it will be based on love and respect, not on how much money you think you're going to get when I die. Thomas cleared his throat. I should also inform you that your mother's will is being revised to include a no-contest clause. If either of you challenges the will or attempts to claim incompetency after her death, you will forfeit your entire inheritance. This is standard practice in situations where there's been evidence of undue influence or manipulation. This is unbelievable, Caroline whispered. You're treating us like criminals. You wrote a letter asking your father to help you control my assets before he was even gone. You've pressured me to sell my home. You've demanded money. You've sent threatening letters. What would you call that? Neither of them had an answer. They sat there, the golden children I'd raised and sacrificed for, and I saw them clearly for the first time. Not as my babies or my family, but as adults who had made choices. Adults who had let greed and entitlement override love and decency. I think we're done here, Thomas said gently. Unless there's anything else? I looked at my children. Caroline was still crying silently. Michael's face was stone. I love you both, I said quietly. I always will. But I don't like you very much right now. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it needs to start with an apology and a change in behavior. Otherwise, I think it's best if we have some distance. They left without a word. I watched them through the window, walking to their cars parked side by side, their heads bent together in urgent conversation, planning their next move probably, figuring out how to salvage the situation, or maybe genuinely processing what had just happened. I didn't know, and I was surprised to find I didn't particularly care. How are you feeling? Thomas asked. Strangely liberated, I admitted, and completely devastated. Is that possible? I think it's entirely possible. You did what needed to be done, Maggie. You set boundaries. You protected yourself. That takes courage. I went home to my big empty house and poured myself a large glass of wine. Then I sat in Richard's study, in his leather chair, and looked around at the books and photographs and mementos of our life together. I hope I did the right thing, I said aloud as if he could hear me. I hope you understand. The house, of course, offered no answer. But sitting there in the gathering twilight, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I'd spent 6 months in grief-stricken fog, vulnerable and confused. But finding that letter had burned away the fog. I saw clearly now, and what I saw was that I was still strong, still capable, still the same woman who had renovated houses and raised children and built a life from nothing. Richard's death had broken my heart, but it hadn't broken me. The next few weeks were quiet. Thanksgiving came and went. Caroline didn't invite me to her house as she'd planned. I spent the holiday with Dorothy and her family, which was lovely. We had roasted turkey and terrible wine and laughter that felt genuine. Dorothy's grandchildren were sweet and chaotic, and for a few hours I didn't think about my own grandchildren, whom I hadn't seen in a month. That was the hardest part. I missed Emma and Sophia, Caroline's daughters. I missed Jake, Michael's son. But my children were using them as leverage, keeping them away, punishing me for refusing to be controlled. I sent gifts for their birthdays with cards saying I loved them. I didn't know if they received them or what they were told about why Grandma wasn't around anymore. In early December, I received a letter from Caroline. Not an anonymous one this time, but a real letter in her distinctive handwriting, on her expensive stationery. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. Dear Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking since that meeting with Thomas. I'm not going to apologize for the letter we wrote to Dad. We were concerned then and we're concerned now. But I am sorry for how things have deteriorated between us. I miss you. The girls miss you. I'd like to find a way forward if you're willing. Could we meet for coffee? Just the two of us, no lawyers, no Michael, just mother and daughter. Please. Love, Caroline. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to refuse to maintain the boundaries I'd established. But another part of me, the mother part that never quite dies no matter what your children do, wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation. I called her that evening. Caroline, I got your letter. Thank you for calling. Her voice was tentative, lacking its usual confidence. Will you meet me? I'll meet you. But I need you to understand that I'm not changing my position. I'm not giving you money. I'm not selling my house. I'm not giving up control of my life or my assets. I understand. I just want to talk. We met at a small cafe in the village, neutral territory. Caroline was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment I saw my daughter again. Not the grasping woman who'd written that terrible letter, but the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. Thank you for coming, she said as we sat down. You said the girls miss me. They do. They keep asking when they can see Grandma. I've been making excuses, but I hate lying to them. Then stop. Bring them to see me. It's not that simple, Mom. David is furious about what happened. He thinks you humiliated us, treating us like criminals in front of your lawyer. He doesn't want the girls exposed to that kind of conflict. There is no conflict if you stop trying to control me. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. I know you think we're terrible people, greedy and selfish, and maybe we are. But you don't understand the pressure we're under. David's family expects a certain lifestyle. His mother judges everything, criticizes the girls' clothes, the activities we can afford, the vacations we take. I'm constantly trying to measure up, and we're drowning in credit card debt trying to maintain appearances. Then stop maintaining appearances. Stop living beyond your means. Stop caring what David's mother thinks. Easy for you to say. You never had to deal with that kind of judgment. No, I had to deal with being poor. With scraping together money for groceries and praying the car wouldn't break down because we couldn't afford repairs. Your father and I built our security through decades of hard work and sacrifice. We didn't inherit it. We earned it. And now you want to shortcut that process by accessing our money before you've done the work yourself. It's not about shortcuts. It's about opportunity. With the right capital, David and I could invest in things that would set us up permanently. Real estate, business ventures, proper financial planning. But we're stuck in this middle-class trap, making good money but spending it all on maintaining our lifestyle. That's a choice, Caroline. You could choose differently. Downsize. Simplify. Live within your actual means instead of your aspirational means. She looked up at me finally, and her eyes were red-rimmed. I don't know how. This is the life I know. The life I was raised to expect. You were raised to value hard work and earning your own way. Somewhere along the line you forgot that. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe was warm and crowded, filled with the sound of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Outside, snow had started to fall, dusting the streets with white. I miss Dad, Caroline said suddenly. Every day. And I'm terrified of losing you too. Then don't. But that means accepting me as I am, respecting my choices, and loving me without conditions or expectations. I do love you. Do you? Or do you love what you think I can provide for you? She flinched as if I'd struck her. That's cruel. It's honest. Caroline, if I were broke, if Richard had left nothing but debts, would you still be calling every Wednesday? Would you still be suggesting we meet for coffee? Or would you have written me off as a burden with nothing to offer? I want to say yes, that I'd still be here. But honestly, I don't know. And that makes me feel like a terrible person. At least it was honest. You're not terrible. But you've made some terrible choices. You've let greed and fear override love. And that's something you need to fix in yourself, Caroline. I can't fix it for you. She nodded slowly. What about the girls? Can they still see you? Of course. I never wanted them punished for this situation. They can come visit any time. But it has to be without strings attached. I'm not going to be manipulated through my grandchildren. I understand. She paused. What about Michael? Have you talked to him? No. Have you? He's angry. Talking about how ungrateful you are, how we're owed this money, how you're being cruel by hoarding it. I don't think he's ready to reconcile. That's his choice. My door is open, but he has to walk through it without demanding anything. We finished our coffee and made tentative plans for the girls to visit the following weekend. As Caroline stood to leave, she hesitated. Mom, that letter we wrote. Dad never responded to it. We waited for him to bring it up, to talk to us about setting up the trust or whatever. But he never did. I wonder sometimes if that's part of what killed him. Knowing that his children were more interested in his money than in him. The thought had occurred to me too. I'll never know. But I think it hurt him. I think he was struggling with what to do about it when he died. I'm sorry. For that and for everything else. I know I haven't apologized properly, but I am. Sorry. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. I watched her walk to her car through the falling snow, and I felt the first small crack in the wall of anger I'd built. She was still my daughter. Flawed, selfish, but still mine. Maybe there was a path forward after all. That weekend, Emma and Sophia came to visit. Caroline dropped them off and left quickly, avoiding extended conversation. The girls were 9 and 12, at that wonderful age before teenagers become too cool for grandparents. They hugged me fiercely and demanded hot chocolate and wanted to know why they hadn't seen me in so long. Your mom and I had some disagreements, I said carefully. Adult things. But it had nothing to do with you, and I've missed you terribly. We made cookies and watched movies and played board games. I let them go through my jewelry box and try on my old costume jewelry, just as they'd always loved to do. Watching them laugh and play in the house that had been so silent, I felt some of the weight lift from my chest. This was what mattered. Not the money or the property or the inheritance disputes. This. Love. Connection. Family in the best sense of the word. When Caroline came to pick them up, the girls begged to stay longer. Please, Mom, just another hour? Caroline looked at me, and I saw uncertainty in her eyes. It's up to your grandmother. They can stay as long as they want, I said. They can even stay for dinner if that's all right with you. She nodded slowly. That would be nice. Maybe I could join you? If you're willing. So we had dinner together, the four of us, in the dining room where I'd hosted so many family meals over the years. It wasn't perfect. There was awkwardness and unspoken tension. But we were trying, and that counted for something. Over the next few months, Caroline and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. She brought the girls over regularly. We went to lunch occasionally, just the two of us, and slowly learned to talk about things other than money and expectations. She told me about her struggles with David's family, about her anxiety and insecurity, about feeling like she was never enough. I listened and I tried to help without enabling. I gave advice, not money. I offered support, not solutions that involved my checkbook. Michael was a different story. He didn't call. He didn't visit. At Christmas, I sent gifts for his family and received nothing in return. Dorothy, who maintained social connections in his neighborhood, reported that he was telling people I'd cut him off, that I was a bitter old woman who'd turned her back on her son. The narrative he was spinning had him as the victim and me as the villain. It hurt, but I couldn't control what he said or thought. I could only control my own actions. In February, over a year since Richard's death, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I made an appointment with Thomas Bradford to discuss revising my will. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, I told him. About what I want to leave behind and what messages I want to send. And what conclusions have you reached? Caroline is making an effort. She's trying to rebuild our relationship without conditions. I want to acknowledge that. Michael isn't. He's still angry and bitter and focused only on what he thinks he deserves. I want to acknowledge that too. So you're thinking of unequal distribution? Yes. And also significant charitable contributions. Richard and I always talked about giving back, but we never quite got around to it. I want to do that now while I can see the impact and make decisions carefully. We spent several sessions working out the details. The revised will left 40% of my estate to Caroline, 10% to Michael, and 50% to be divided among charities. The local arts foundation, the library, scholarship funds for students in need, organizations that had mattered to Richard and me over the years. The will included detailed explanations for my choices, not to be spiteful, but to be clear about the consequences of how my children had treated me. I want them to understand, I told Thomas, that how they treated me while I was alive affected what they received after I died. That love and respect matter more than blood relations. And that I had every right to dispose of my assets as I saw fit, to support causes I believed in, not just to pass wealth down family lines. Thomas drafted a letter to accompany the will, written in my voice, explaining my reasoning. It was firm but not cruel, honest but not vindictive. It acknowledged both children's behaviors and explained how I'd responded. But I didn't wait until death to start giving back. That spring, I started volunteering at the women's shelter downtown. I taught financial literacy classes to women escaping abusive relationships, helping them understand credit and budgeting and building economic independence. It felt good to use my knowledge for something meaningful, to help people who genuinely needed support rather than people who simply wanted what I had. I also made a substantial donation to establish the Richard Henderson Memorial Scholarship at the community college. Richard had always believed in education, in giving people opportunities to better themselves. The scholarship would help non-traditional students, people returning to school after life changes, people like the young mother in my financial literacy class who dreamed of becoming a nurse but couldn't afford tuition. As summer approached, I decided to take that Alaska cruise I'd mentioned months ago, the one that had so concerned Caroline and Michael. I booked a luxury cabin on a small ship that would cruise the Inside Passage for 2 weeks. It would be expensive, but I could afford it, and I was tired of living in fear of spending money I'd earned. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to leave, Michael finally called. I hadn't heard from him in 4 months. Mom, I heard from Caroline that you're going on some cruise. Hello to you too, Michael. Yes, I'm going to Alaska. Alaska? That's going to cost a fortune. Do you think that's wise? Traveling alone at your age. I'm 74, not 94. And it's my money to spend as I choose. There was a pause. Then his voice softer. Look, I know things have been bad between us. Jennifer thinks I should apologize, make an effort to repair things before it's too late. And what do you think? I think you've been stubborn and unreasonable. But I also think I miss my mother. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was a start. I've missed you too, Michael. But missing me isn't enough. You need to accept that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. You need to stop seeing me as a bank account with legs. He laughed, short and bitter. That's harsh. But accurate? Another pause. Maybe. Probably. I've been so focused on trying to solve my financial problems that I forgot you're a person, not a solution. Your financial problems aren't my responsibility, Michael. They never were. I know. I think I've always known. But it's hard when you see this money just sitting there, and you're struggling, and it feels like you could solve everything with just a fraction of what you have. That money isn't sitting there. It's my security. It's what allows me to live independently, to help causes I care about, to take cruises to Alaska if I want to. It's working exactly as it should. You're right. God, I hate admitting that, but you're right. He sighed heavily. Can I see you when you get back from your trip? Can we try to figure out how to be a family again? I'd like that. But it means accepting me as I am, Michael. No more pressure about money. No more suggestions about how I should live my life. Just being my son. I can try. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a door opening. The cruise was everything I'd hoped it would be. The scenery was breathtaking. The glaciers ancient and majestic. I made friends with other solo travelers, joined shore excursions, even tried kayaking for the first time in decades. Every morning I woke up in a different port, looked out at pristine wilderness, and felt grateful to be alive. grateful to be healthy enough to travel, grateful to have the resources to experience such beauty. I thought about Richard often during those 2 weeks. He would have loved this trip. He would have taken thousands of photographs and insisted on learning the names of every mountain and glacier. But I also realized something important. I could enjoy it without him. His death had broken my heart, but it hadn't broken my spirit. I was still capable of joy, of adventure, of new experiences. The grief would always be with me, but it didn't have to define me. When I returned, both Michael and Caroline came to the airport to pick me up. It was awkward at first, the three of us standing together after so many months of conflict and distance. But I hugged them both and they hugged me back. And it felt like maybe we could find our way back to being a family. Over dinner that night at my house, I showed them photographs from the cruise and told stories about the people I'd met and the places I'd seen. They listened without making comments about the cost or suggesting it had been foolish. When Michael asked if I'd enjoyed myself, his question seemed genuine, not loaded with hidden meaning. I loved it, I told them. I felt like myself again for the first time since your father died. Independent and capable and alive. Good, Caroline said quietly. That's how you should feel. After dinner, as Caroline and Michael prepared to leave, Michael hesitated at the door. Mom, about what I said before. About needing money for the business. I've been thinking about what you said about earning our own way. I talked to a financial counselor, and Jennifer and I are making some changes. Downsizing, budgeting better. Living within our means instead of beyond them. How does that feel? He smiled ruefully. Terrifying, but also kind of freeing. We're not keeping up with anyone anymore. We're just being ourselves. Caroline nodded. David and I have been having similar conversations. We're considering selling the Greenwich house, maybe moving somewhere less pretentious. The girls don't need private school to get a good education. We've been living for other people's approval instead of our own values. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. These were the children I'd raised. Somewhere under the greed and entitlement, the values Richard and I had tried to instill were still there. It had just taken a crisis to bring them to the surface. That fall, I did something that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. I invited Caroline and Michael and their families to Thanksgiving dinner at my house. The big house that they'd wanted me to sell. Around the table where we'd shared so many holiday meals when they were growing up. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension. Still conversations that veered too close to sensitive topics. But the children played in the same rooms where their parents had played 30 years earlier. Caroline helped me in the kitchen without suggesting I hire a caterer. Michael carved the turkey without commenting on whether I really needed such a large bird for just family. During the meal, I raised my glass for a toast. I want to say something, I began, and the table grew quiet. This year has been difficult for all of us. We've said things we regret, done things we're not proud of. But we're here. We're family. And that means we keep trying, we keep forgiving, we keep loving each other even when it's hard. Emma, Caroline's youngest, piped up. Grandma, are you going to take another cruise? I laughed. Maybe. Would you like me to bring you back something special? Just bring yourself back, she said solemnly. We missed you when you were gone. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat in Richard's study with a cup of tea and looked at the photographs from Alaska that I'd had framed and hung on the wall. The mountains reflected in still water, the massive face of a glacier, myself smiling on the deck of the ship with the wind whipping my gray hair. I looked happy. I looked alive. I pulled out a piece of paper and began writing a letter to my children. Not a legal document or a statement for posterity, but a simple note expressing what I'd learned over the past year. Caroline and Michael, I wrote, this year has taught me that love isn't about what we give each other or what we expect to receive. It's about accepting each other as we are, respecting each other's choices, and choosing to be present in each other's lives without conditions. I know I won't live forever, and someday you will inherit what your father and I built. But I hope by then you'll understand that the money isn't the most important thing I'm leaving you. I'm leaving you the knowledge that you're strong enough to build your own lives, that you don't need to wait for someone else to die to have what you want, and that family means showing up for each other not because of what you might gain but because of what you might give. I love you both. I'm proud of the people you're becoming. And I'm grateful we found our way back to each other. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in my desk drawer, not hidden this time, but where it could be easily found when the time came. Then I went upstairs to bed in the house that was still mine, in the life I'd chosen to keep living on my own terms. 2 years later I was still in that house. Still traveling, still volunteering, still living independently. Caroline had indeed sold the Greenwich house and moved to a smaller place in a less prestigious town. Her girls thrived in public school and seemed happier without the pressure of keeping up appearances. Michael's business had stabilized, not through dramatic growth but through steady, sustainable practices. Both my children visited regularly, not to check on their investments, but to spend time with their mother. The letter that had started it all was still in Thomas Bradford's safe, evidence of a moment when my children had forgotten who they were supposed to be. But it no longer defined our relationship. They'd grown past it and so had I. We'd all learned that family isn't about what you inherit or what you're owed. It's about choosing to love each other despite your flaws, to respect each other despite your differences, and to build relationships based on who you are, not what you have. Sometimes I still missed Richard with an ache that took my breath away. But I'd also discovered something I never expected. That I could be happy alone, that I could build a meaningful life as a widow, that independence and solitude weren't things to fear but gifts to embrace. The woman who had raised children and supported a husband's career had evolved into someone who pursued her own interests, traveled where she wanted to go, and gave her time and resources to causes that mattered to her. On quiet evenings, I sometimes sat in Richard's study and remembered the afternoon I'd found that terrible letter. The shock and betrayal and anger. But also the strength it had awakened in me, the clarity it had provided about what I would and wouldn't accept. Finding that letter had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. It had forced me to stop being the accommodating mother who never said no, the agreeable widow who let others make decisions for her. It had reminded me that I was still Margaret Henderson, the woman who had built a life from nothing, and that I wasn't done living yet. The inheritance dispute that had threatened to destroy our family had ultimately made us stronger. My children had learned that love can't be bought or demanded, only given freely. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't cruel but necessary. That protecting myself didn't make me selfish but wise. And we'd all learned that the most valuable things we inherit from our families aren't monetary at all. They're lessons about resilience and dignity, about standing up for yourself and choosing to forgive, about the difference between being entitled to something and being worthy of it. As I write this, I'm 76 years old. The house is still mine, the money is still under my control, and my relationships with my children are stronger than they've been in years. I take cruises when I want to, donate to causes I believe in, and spend my days exactly as I choose. The hidden letter that once threatened to tear us apart has become just one chapter in a larger story about family, forgiveness, and finding the courage to live life on your own terms, no matter how old you are when you finally learn how to do it.